do you think manufacturers then, because I've been saying this for a while, but manufacturers, those closest to a problem, to the problem, have the greatest responsibility in fixing the problem. So if you're, I don't know, Android, and you have people using your mobile devices in these high-risk communities, does Google bear the responsibility to make a more safe device? Or do we have to wait for an app developer to figure out how to lock down the Android device 99 different ways and stay up on everything? Like, ethically, does Microsoft bear the most responsibility to fix their operating system, or is it up to the market to invent a new desktop sensor, blah, 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 to fix a Microsoft problem, right? It seems like in today's world, the closer you are to the problem, you just happen to have more responsibility. Or does that scare people? Does it scare you? Like, I don't want the responsibility, I just want to write the thing.
I worry about software engineers being responsible for ethical decisions.
But the
really
company,
worry.
But the engineers don't, but business leadership has to say.
They do. But I think big business has become so big, it's bigger than government now. And in the past, it would be government that would legislate around ethics.
So if it's not the
law.
engineer at the company that makes the product, is it an engineer at a company that doesn't make the product that's trying to fix the problem?
Well,
like, who's...
Well, one example would be self-driving cars. You know, we all know the example. You've got a group of kids here, and you've got someone here, and you have to choose one. Which one?
Yeah,
it has to be in there.
So where do you think the responsibility lies?
I think it should be shared responsibility because...
I'm not Microsoft. I can't compile the code.
At least in terms of feedback loop, right? Telling them where the things are wrong, going wrong. Maybe they don't even know the problem.
Right. We can tell Microsoft about the problem.
So everyone will have
I'm not picking on Microsoft.
Responsibility, just share it.
I'm picking on Microsoft because they seem to be the most responsible. So they get the attention because they're doing it right in so many areas. But I also don't think that's a universally accepted norm that companies are like, well, we made it, it's our problem. It's more like, well, there's a marketplace that will fix our problem, right? Or they'll make antivirus, to cover up our deficiencies.
Yeah, but it's going to be like that because, for example, if you take AWS, in terms of security, the model is shared responsibility, right?
But in AWS, how many open containers, buckets, get all their data stolen, and there's no red flag that says, by the way, your bucket's open to the world? I mean,
that's a different...
Come on, guys, right? Who's responsible? You could say the engineer didn't quite do the check. It's like, come on, Amazon, give me a red flashing flag. Are you sure you want your bucket open? Yes, no, you're signing off on this. Get your manager in here,
They have a different service for that.
That's another paid service, right? Because they're not going to, yeah.
Of course.
But those implementation flaws are always going to be around, right? Because
for decades, Amazon's had that implementation flaw.
Yeah, like 100% agree with you with that. But, when we were talking about like the distributed data and things like that, there was a client of ours who they were a data company. They had multi-cloud distributed data that was sharded all over the place. That one node didn't have any of the same data. You could only get bits of the data. But then when we went and reviewed it, they had huge amounts of security built into this thing. They were even discarding some of the data so that you couldn't reconstruct some of it. And we came in and we're like, all right, so you've got the same containers everywhere, and if I break into one of them, because it's the same as all of these other 1,000 containers, I can actually get all of the data, right? And that just blew their mind because it was such a simple thing to see that they've gone to all of this effort
on the data and
implementation flaw. Again, just almost, it's not really a logic flaw, but just a human oversight that leads to these things. And I mean, I talk about these magical turnkey sort of security things, but, you sort of look at Amazon and you look at Microsoft and Apple and all of the presentations that we're seeing throughout Black Hat, showing how many different ways we can break all of them, even with the latest, versions of some of these things.
But if the trend is more Microsoft, Azure, whatever, 360, they fix a problem, it fixes it for everybody who's a tenant of theirs. GitHub tells you when you're going to accidentally publish a secret. It seems like maybe we can create a norm where it's like, well, you can see what everybody's making, Amazon can see all the open buckets and send an alert, hey, bucket's still open to the world on your weekly dashboard or whatever. Like if we can create that norm, it seems like that might actually do more good than inventing the next, I don't know, neural network AI blockchain NFT, because you're actually solving and moving the needle. But it's not maybe sexy, but it's useful. And it all comes from a company saying, well, we're in a unique position to make a change, to move the needle.
That's fine for the giants, right? But what
Yeah.
about the other 100 million companies that are not giants, and it's their responsibility to protect their data?
Yeah. I mean, if you're Salesforce, and you probably have some responsibility, it just seems like you want that people entering the market to feel like, it's not an externality anymore.
They have security teams, right?
Yeah.
And decent-sized security teams.
Yeah.
Right, but then for the companies, the majority of companies who don't.
Okay, so let's shift to the next topic, which is a little maybe more controversial, but it's the Russian invasion of Ukraine and how that played out kind of digitally, maybe the ways we expected or didn't. But one of the things that I found most fascinating is we've all been inundated by movies for the last, I don't know, 2-3 decades about the super intelligent AI attack thing that'll shut down all the power or the water or destroy everybody's phones. And so I was waiting for it to happen, and it didn't happen. And so talking to people in Ukraine about what's going on, it seemed like there was a big attack, then there's a lot of damage, but they recovered, the civil society, right? And they got really good at taking away the attack tools from Russia. So they used it, but then it got submitted to VirusTotal, or it got pushed out in an AV update or whatever. And things seemed to get progressively less effective. That was really fascinating to watch. The other thing was just some of the fights occurring on Amazon in Azure, cloud space, multi-tenant. Like the civilians are now the terrain, right? The battlefield. That seemed new. And finally, the thing that I found fascinating was civilians on their own accord sort of imposing their own sanctions and just saying, you know what, we don't want to do business. Like the people who don't do business in Russia anymore, they voluntarily stopped selling beer or whatever. Some cloud providers said, we're not taking any more Russian customers, or MongoDB in their community said, hey, everybody, migrate your projects out if you're in Russia. In 6 months, we're shutting you down. Thank you very much. Go someplace else. Kind of in a friendly breakup. Have you seen anything that surprised you or anything that made you rethink the sort of version of cyber war, cyber Pearl Harbor that that was the popular narrative for so long, and we're kind of at one, and it's not playing out like, that's not the movie I watched.
Well, again, I think that presentation I referenced before around the OT deep lateral movement, and the intent was to disable the safety controls on physical devices. So, like you say, whether it's a bridge or if it's a water treatment or whatever it is, right? The complexity of actually carrying that out is not a job for AI. It's a very targeted attack that, to be able to pull off in warfare. I mean, you're planning this sort of stuff, at scale years beforehand, not just sort of hitting the magic Skynet button and saying go, right?